Hi, Martin. Welcome again to episode 73 of Illuminating Rounds. Second time lucky.
Yeah, feeling a little bit of deja vu here.
So we've just recorded most of this episode and then realised that my microphone wasn't recording. So not that anybody else cares apart from you, Martin. But you've got to listen to this all over again. You'll know this episode well by the end of it. How are you doing?
Yeah, absolutely fine. Yeah, good. Thank you. Good. Yeah, brilliant.
And you are enjoying retirement? This is...
Yeah, it's a very strange feeling. Yeah, I mean, technically I'm still employed until the end of this month, end of August. But for all intents and purposes, I have begun my retirement.
And as we said, you planned it perfectly with the cost of living crisis.
Yeah, no, that's been fantastic for my my forecasts, my budgets and things like that. Yeah, just to find out now all my bills are going to double or more. Yeah, it's excellent.
It's a very rough time to be a pensioner. So, but this does play into the question that we kind of raised before about whether ASL is a cheap hobby or an expensive hobby. In that, once you have made your investment and you're into ASL, in theory now you have a lifetime's worth of enjoyment, entertainment ahead of you for what you've got in your cupboards, as it were. Yeah.
In fact, we were just kind of talking about it earlier, weren't we? Well, possibly when we were failing to record the other version of this. That they're just going through the modules and just how many scenarios there are there that I've just never played. I mean, in modules you'd have thought would be quite sort of high profile, but there are just a very, very, very large number of scenarios I just haven't played. Yeah.
And not only that, and there are definitely some scenarios that we have to play that we probably haven't played, and we can ask for lists of must-play scenarios, and we'll end up with 30 that we've never even heard of before. But also, there's a whole kind of load of supporting casts of scenarios that you can turn into some really good encounters. And I remember, because as we were flicking through some of the Journal 7, Martyrs Not Martyrs, one of my favourite scenarios. Nothing particularly special about Martyrs Not Martyrs, but I played it 3 times very quickly. I can't remember, maybe a couple of times against you and maybe once in a tournament or something like that.
Yeah.
And kind of learned to appreciate it in a different way than we would do when we just play a scenario once. And sometimes it feels like, like how, this is going to overstate it, but if you walk through an art gallery and you go, yeah, that painting's nice, that painting's nice, and you kind of just take them all for granted. And I feel sometimes we do that with ASL scenarios, in that there are definitely some that are worth, kind of a once and done, that's it. But many of them, because of the depth of the system and the depth of the ability to come up with new systems or new tactics in a particular scenario, you can actually breathe life into any scenario almost, without even getting into the self-balancing as well. But we really do not give enough credit to the system sometimes for the depth you can go down when you're looking at just one particular scenario, not even necessarily a great scenario, just a decent scenario, And so what I'm saying there is that we think we've got all this depth, but actually it's compounded. There's an extra dimension to it all. We look at these 6,000 scenarios that we've got in our cupboards, and we think that's a lifetime to play. Yeah, but in a way, just beyond Valor is depth in amongst itself that would probably last you. If that's all you ever had. Could.
It just reminds me slightly of when I used to play squad leader as when I was very, very, as a young man, I suppose. And I did have a couple of opponents, but there were only those 12 scenarios. Now, I think there were other gamettes, but we never invested in them in those days. But so we had these 12 scenarios. We never really played the American ones that much. So it was the 6 German, Russian scenarios we played many, many times. And you would you get a deeper relationship, a better relationship with a handful of scenarios like that. And I think you're right, with something like Beyond Valor, you could have a very deep relationship with with those scenarios if that's all you had. And it would still be quite an interesting world,
Yeah.
I mean, you probably would exhaust just Beyond Valor, but the 5,000 scenarios we've got or more is an absolute abundance of wealth, really.
Yeah. And in a way that we talked about this, but when you pick a scenario to play, It's a little bit like, again, overstated it. I'm gonna be in an overstating mood. You know how they talk about the odds of you being born? Like it's, 1 in 400 million sperm, and against the, I don't know, the eggs of the, the mother, or whatever it is. There's what are the chances? You are the one. It's a little bit like that, picking a scenario for ASL to play, in that you've got 6 other thousands of scenarios, 7,000, whatever it is, competing for your playtime. And you pick that scenario.
Yeah,
it's incredible.
Just because it's the better swimmer on that day, really, isn't it? It's whatever. Don't
Because
know how this metaphor
name.
works as we develop it, but yeah,
yeah. But yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? So the other big question that we're going to frame today is: do you enjoy playing by yourself, Martin, or playing with yourself? I don't know what the correct.
You really want me to answer that question?
I think we'll find out today. We'll find out.
Oh, SASL.
SASL.
We're on the same page now.
We are. So we are playing today a scenario from the SASL guy. So it's Andrea Fantozzi. His Mission Generation Project program, something, and his SASL++ system. So this is meant to breathe life into SASL, and I don't know whether arguably it needs life brought into it, because it's still, I think, doing very, very well. There's definitely pockets of the internet and the community that play SASL fairly religiously. It's it's considered quite a staple in many people's playing. And
actually, then there's talk of a third edition. Is that
there is? Yeah, there is talk of third edition. I think it's one of those things where MMP don't possibly know the demand for it, and I don't know whether it will go on to like a P500 style pre-order. And it's interesting because I was talking to Indy about biggest regrets of his life, and he told me his biggest regret, and it could be solved with just £400, because he told me that his biggest regret was not buying SASL when he had the chance, and it's now available for £400. Now, if you could change your biggest regret, Martin, for just £400, you'd do it, wouldn't you? I'm sure.
Absolutely.
You wouldn't buy that lottery ticket or whatever, but Indy wouldn't spend £400 on the SASL.
I think Indy is rather lucky in that not buying SASL when it came out being his biggest regret in life. There's most of us. There's a woman that got away. There's a job you never took. There's the investment you never made. There's all sorts of things. And with Indy, it's not buying SASL. Yeah,
I mean, and you told me once,
life.
Trevor Edwards.
Yes.
Once said, biggest regret not picking up ASL, not discovering ASL sooner.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a great regret to have in a way, isn't it? I mean, as your biggest, everyone's got a biggest regret, but that's not a bad regret to have.
It's not a bad one. No. I got about 8 better than that. Yeah.
Well, one of them won't be forgetting your Denant password, because we have recovered your Denant password, so we are back on Denant soon. We're going to play through day 2 of that coming up. That's going to be our next.
I think we're well on into day 2, actually. Yeah, so we're going to complete day 2. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah,
and there's only 5 days, so we're almost halfway through it by that point. So it's crazy not to carry. So we will carry through. There's been a lot of requests for us to get back through that, so we will.
And we've had some real technical difficulties because it was so long ago, isn't it? I lost my purchase notes, so I've had to recreate that, and we had the mix up over the password, which we changed. We changed my password so that we were in sync, so that we could see each other's hips and stuff for recording illuminating rounds. And then, of course, we've both gone back to our normal password, and neither of us could uncover. And
I literally had to try and remember. I couldn't remember, because I clearly couldn't remember what password I'd suggested to you, and I didn't know if you'd taken my suggestion. But I remember having a conversation with you, and I was trying to think, okay, if I was to give you a password that I wanted you to remember that didn't reveal my inner psyche of. Yes. So I went, try Dave, and it worked. That was our moment of hacking. So we hacked Vassal, got your password back again for. And so we're back on that. So that's that. We're going to talk about our challenge, the best ASL products ever. Hacker Palais beat the Winter Offensive packs. Only just. It was quite close. So thank you very much for everybody who voted on that. Thank you again for all the Patreons. Guys, if ever you need to change your levels down, up, whatever, that's absolutely fine. We're grateful for the support, no matter what you do. And, we understand that there are some tricky times ahead for people. Please don't feel bad. Don't feel like you have to justify it to us. It's absolutely fine. I will say that patrons now have all of the gun and vehicle notes and numbers on the scenario archive. Non-Patreons have the vehicle notes and numbers as a hover over. Sorry, not the notes, the numbers as a hover over. But that's thanks to Stefan and to Morris, who did an amazing job there. I gave it the chef's kiss at the end and kind of enabled it, but they did all the ridiculously hard work. So
you wiped the plate with a bit of spilt gravy in the wrong place, didn't you?
I've probably even just pointed out to them where the gravy was spilt, and they probably fixed that. But yeah,
amazing. That's a massive job, isn't it, that they've been doing?
They did, and so I'd say thankless. I'm thanking them profusely, and I'm sure everybody who's involved is also thanking them for what they've done. But it's a huge benefit. So, for example, now when I see some random gun on the archive, for a mission, for a scenario, I can just hover over it. I look at the vehicle note number, and I can go find it in my system. So it's quite nice to be able to do that. And like I say, there are vehicle notes as well there, and gun notes available too. Thank you guys for doing that. What else, Martin? What else?
Well, in terms of what we're going to talk about today, that's it.
All right, let's
Toby's tax tips.
What were they?
Toby's tip tanks.
We do have some tips about how to use your tanks, which is
from Toby.
And this is a tip that I can definitely get behind. So, I'm all up for this. In the meantime, let's take a look at the SASL mission that we generated. Yeah. So, SASL, for those that haven't played SASL, you generate a mission based on a situation. The official one has, I think the second edition has something like 10 or 12 of these, maybe more. And they range from kind of like attack, defense, bunker busting, patrols, all sorts of things, city fights. And in general, you can generate an infinite number, I would say, of scenarios. I mean, there are different nationalities. The SASL project is very well supported in terms of nationalities. I even realised that Armies of Oblivion produced the Axis miners as part of their generation tables. So if you wanted to play up against or with the Axis miners, you can do that, which is pretty cool. So there's very little you can't do with SASL.
The second edition, I presume, that introduced those. Yeah.
It was the Armies of Oblivion that actually produced it. So,
of course, yes, of course. I'm sorry.
But second edition did bring in new nationalities. I think the British came in the second edition, and bits and pieces like that. Japanese, I'm not sure. Maybe they were second edition as well. How it works in general for those that have never played SASL is you generate suspects counters, which we're using as the cloaking counters here. These suspect counters will be activated generally when the enemy is advancing. The enemy is always considered to be the AI, and in this instance, the British, who Martin are the friendly. They are activated, and they may turn out to be nothing. They may turn out to be a couple of squads, a heavy machine gun, and a leader. It might turn out to be a tank. You don't really know. And the SASL kind of system kind of does that. Now, I will also give a big shout out to the Saucer 2 project, which was, I think, Robert Delwood, I think is our hero's name. And the Saucer 2 project is a free project, and it saves you hundreds of dice rolls by basically letting you activate these counters automatically. So you push a button after you've configured what the system is, and it will tell you, okay, this is a German 658, 648, whatever it is, and a medium machine gun and a leader and a smoke or whatever it might be. And it just handles that. And that saves a huge amount of time. So I would imagine, unless you are really going for a purist view of SASL, where you are sitting in a room rolling dice and playing literally just yourself, the Saucer 2 project is an amazing little bit of software for people to use. It actually also has voice activation. So if you really wanted to, you can tell it things like roll activation, or pull a chit from A to G or something like that. There's things like that you can do as well. Now, we didn't do that, but it's certainly something you can do if you want to. So this mission, British against the Germans, 1943 in Italy. But there are 3 victory locations. There's one up in the north, there's one in the south, and there's also one in the southwest-ish, I suppose. The MGP system gives you a little bit more on top of what SASL gives you. So it gives you things like mission priorities, intelligence levels, things like that. And so for you, Martin, your mission priority was high and your intelligence was excellent. How many times they've said that about you? I can't answer. The resistance was high. Your enemy activation number was a 3. Random events were 4 and 5. You had a SAN of 6, and you got 6 support points, and that let you buy a few points in a kind of campaign style thing. So do you want to talk about what you bought?
Yeah, there was a big range of things I could choose from, or fairly big range. I chose to spend 3 of those 6 points on an infantry platoon. And then there's an element of rolling for support weapons and things like that. I don't think I did too well on that, and I got a 6+1 leader.
Yep.
Because I partly bought the infantry platoon in the hope of getting a decent leader. I also bought a gun section, and I was again, you roll then to find out what you get. I was kind of hoping for some hefty sort of infantry or artillery guns I could put around the victory condition areas, just blast anyone who gets too close away. But I got the 76mm British mortars. I got 3 of those, which are bizarre weapons in a way, because really they're long distance weapons, so they can't fire within 6. It has to be a minimum of 6 hex range, which we all know in ASL terms. Often the fighting's a little bit closer than 6 hex range, so they quickly became a little bit redundant, which was a shame. But but that's all part of the fun of thinking about how you tie those things into the defence. It's all part of the challenge.
And the other challenge about SASL that is kind of different to normal ASL is the command and control rules. And this is a little bit, I think you certainly had a little play with it before, and I think you said you didn't really get on with the command and control. And I've had the same thing where I've kind of just ignored it.
It's not so much that once you look at it, it's not necessarily that difficult. But I was trying to learn the SASL rules, and so I'm kind of like incorporate all these different things into try to play the game, and that just felt like the rule that broke the camel's back for me in terms of like my brain capacity to kind of deal with stuff. But I think once you've learned all the other rules, actually the command and control rules are not that complex. Yeah.
So looking at your setup, defending these 3 victory locations, you kind of had a very passive setup here. And I think that plays into the hand of the AI. I think this is my kind of initial thoughts, because what's going to happen is the enemy's going to throw lots of things at you, and the real advantage you have is open ground and the enemy doing silly things. I mean, that's kind of the classic SASL kind of mentality, is it will throw stuff at you. The SASL and kind of associated material provide a little bit more intelligence for the counters. And to be fair, I did not study those as well as I could have done. So I kind of used a mix of standard SASL rules and MGP and SASL++ where I was able to. I think the effect is still broadly the same, but you could definitely finesse the playing of the AI. And if you wanted a tougher challenge, the SASL++ is absolutely where you want to be. I would advise, I think, to start, if you were brand new to this, but you've got SASL sitting in a cupboard, I would advise playing SASL first without any of these rules a few times. And I think probably Andrea even says something like that. Yeah. You need to be quite familiar with the SASL rules, mainly because when you are looking at Andrea's rules, it's quite tricky to remember which parts are overriding the SASL rules and which parts are relying on the SASL rules. And so consequently, you're flicking backwards and forwards between the two quite a bit. If you're very comfortable with the SASL rules and you pick up Andrea's rule set, it'll be a lot more straightforward to realise what overlays and what replaces the SASL rules. I have no criticism at all of Andrea's stuff. It's excellent. I think it's great to see it being supported, and there is plenty of people playing this kind of stuff out on the internet and in their own homes. So with that said, we will push on. So I guess, Martin, you're sitting here in the in the lion's teeth, as it were, waiting for the SASL thing. The SASL system for this one are going to bring on a random number, but it's basically 3 dice 10. So, and there are 50 activation counters, and they come on effectively in a random location off board, and they will be kind of moving in particular ways. And you'll see there they get activated at certain points. Now, we weren't certain at this point about whether or not units carry on moving when they're activated, and that's a very clear rule in SASL that I just missed. So, for example, here we kind of sometimes miss the fact that they're supposed to stop when they're activated. So you'll see a couple of times the cloak encounters are revealed, and then they don't stop.
Jez, I think it might be that it would be a great place to have the mortars right on that wood firing on because they become useless so quickly in the game. Actually, it'd be really good to strip concealment and use those relatively heavy mortars right at the beginning. Yeah. So this was said, the disadvantage of the Germans is, or the AI is that it will run across some open ground, and that's where you catch the guys out. So this is the kind of you've kind of got to make hay when the sun shines because you will get swarmed. And it's an interesting thing is it's a challenge in terms of trying to manage your depleting force. Now, when you're playing a campaign game in SASL, you do actually have to think about whether or not you want to call it a day and kind of lose the mission but save your troops, because you'll suffer various ELR losses, and your campaign replacements will be pretty poor if you lose more and more stuff. So we see here that there's a bunch more stuff that gets activated on turn 2. And I mean, not dissimilar to a scenario, in terms of if I saw you set up like this against me, I'd be pretty happy that I was going to get across this open ground without too much. Now, one of the problems with the SASL system is, as you'll see at the top here, is that the units can kind of neglect rear defenders because they're going to push towards the victory locations almost at any cost. Yeah.
And that's quite an interesting thing, because if they get a little bit unlucky and start to advance away from the enemy, you'll see that here's your first mortar sighting here coming in. You'll start to see that the enemy kind of ignores rear defenders, and you can definitely do okay there. The other thing to mention is that at the start of each turn, the enemy have to make a roll to see what they're actually going to do. So frequently, they will opt to move instead of what you'd hope firing, or fire instead of moving, and that's just part of the system. It's just part of the thing. We'll see here that there's it's a little bit Zulu-esque. There are thousands of them coming running on. It generates a very messy game, I will say that. There's not a lot of cohesion, but it doesn't really care.
No,
it's gonna kind of do its best.
It's quite daunting as a defender, because there's an awful lot as things start to generate. You get an awful lot of guys coming at you.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, Martin, if you just want to synchronize with me again, because I've just now reloaded our second bit. We missed a turn of the log, so this is now skips forward to turn 4.
I'm back.
All right.
Yeah.
That was my mistake on that one. But basically, you've seen we had a tank come on, a crew exposed tank that was promptly recalled by your sniper. Some berserk guys broke in through your lines. Did a good job of kind of getting through that.
Yeah.
But it was a lot like staving off the inevitable, wasn't it, really?
You get berserkers, I think, a little bit more often, actually.
Yeah.
Because just because of the way they're generated by is it a 12?
That's right. Yeah, 12 on the movement order generates them for the SASL project. And so so we can see that we've kind of got into the city now. The top half, the northern section, this is where we started to put fire and move counters on them to help out a little bit. The top section pretty much holds off. I mean, you had a fairly light kind of support there, didn't you? You had 2 or 3 squads, and the enemy couldn't really break through it at all.
No. And only the 6+1 leader, who was almost never in command.
Yes, yeah, he did.
Yeah,
he was very poor. But the enemy kind of were pulled towards the location in the centre to start with, and obviously they'll swing back up again once this is under control.
Yeah.
But every now and again they make some crazy decisions, but actually turn out really well. And then immediately afterwards they'll do something which is a bit crazy, like run, headlong down a road. In fact, I think it was this one here that survived. Was it a 20 down 3 shot or something?
Yes.
And then only to be killed by the 4 down 2.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly what happened. In fact, the S5 group never really as successful as I intended them to be.
Right. These guys down here. I mean, but I should say, there was very little in terms of decision making that I made. I tried to, there were things probably that the rules took care of that I could have found, but I didn't. So, for example, things like deciding to leave a leader behind with broken units, as opposed to, and it's probably catered for in the rules, but I didn't look up for that. But in general, it was very straightforward. And I think if you are new to the system, it's in ASL. You could do worse in play SASL because it does give you a feel for, well, what happens if I just throw units at a defended.
I slightly quite enjoy the fact that in some respects it's not competitive because you don't know that it's balanced.
Yep.
You're not playing a human who's getting the better of you. So it's kind of a good way to experiment and see what happens, because it kind of doesn't really matter if it doesn't go right, does it?
Exactly.
It's almost like role playing.
Yeah, exactly. It was funny. Like when I was rolling poorly for my guys, I didn't care. Didn't care at all. There was not. You didn't care if you were losing. It was a very low. Low
stakes.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, low stress as well. It wasn't.
I mean, if you were doing a campaign and you're a bit more committed to this company, though, you might feel differently.
Definitely.
Every time that the enemy gets a good roll.
That's very true. That's very true. I think Andrea's aware that sometimes the AI gets a little bit too many turns in his situations. This was situation number 1. It could have been an attack or defense, and it happened to be that we rolled for you defending. I think in the end it didn't matter how many turns. I think at this point it looked like the Germans were going to win this. And we think you're up against something like sort of 30 or so squads and a couple of tanks. And I mean, you've got, was it 10, 12, 13, 14, something like that squads.
Yeah. To be fair, the tanks didn't really have any impact on the scenario.
It's true. Yeah, that's true. But they didn't lose them like I do. They just sat back, fired. And you can see that here there was a whole bunch of firing that really shouldn't have happened for the AI, but it chose to. And kind of got close to making inroads to that top victory condition. I think even up there you will eventually take it. So you can see here at this point you're completely broken in your victory condition down here, and the AI took 7 turns to do it. Still at least one more to go, and then in theory you can be graded for how well you did. So if you get all 3 of your victory conditions, you score a better point. You get a better points for your campaign score as it were. Now we didn't have any random events. We were every time we were looking for a random event, hoping.
We were disappointed, weren't we?
Yeah, because that could have added some spice to it. but no random events were rolled.
I mean, that's like I don't know, something like 18 win dice rolls, and not once did we roll a 4 and a 5. Was it 4 and 5 the random events?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and there was others as well that could have done as well for me.
Yeah.
On the attack. So at this point, you've pushed me off of the top area. Just a couple of half squads left, but the bottom area is looking bleak for you.
Yeah.
So we get some very, very little panicking going on by my guys, to be fair. Did roll well on that.
You got the pin task check, which loses me my concealment.
Yes.
And then I started to feel a bit anxious.
Yeah, the berserk guys
kind
of running down the bottom there.
And of course, actually, that group broke, didn't they?
Going into close combat at the top here.
Yeah.
With my
which I survive.
Squad. Yeah. At this point, so you
chose to resign. Yeah, there's no way I was going to hang on to M6. Yeah. I don't think.
Exactly. So that was that. It was good fun, wasn't it? It was It was something. If I had no opponents, SASL is absolutely perfectly respectful to play and to be done. So big thanks to Andrea for doing that. I think it's definitely a system that could be explored to a huge extent. Picking companies to go through a campaign through the war and rolling up different missions. And to be fair, I was looking at I'd forgotten just how comprehensive the campaign system was in SASL itself. So, mission selection tables and squad seasoning tables, company leader types and company refits and squad replacements, all these bits and pieces. It was very good. Andrea's done other things, like he's done boards where little Excel macros that you can generate any board, with the two boards, any kind of combination based on the newer boards. I'd like to see him do the double wide boards as well, and that's something he's potentially thinking about. But I mean, as an ASL kind of side project or whatever, it's incredible. And if you do have a SASL mission that you'd like to share with us, we will highlight them to show you, just what can happen and the kind of stuff.
Would it be easier for people to do it on Vassal, or if you were going to play on your own, would you play it on Vassal, or would you go for the boards?
So I think a lot of people play ASL to get away from screens. I think that is one thing. But for the ease of having a system where you haven't got to put anything away and you've got all the counters there, it's pretty good. There's a mod that I was using that Andrea supplied me, which is the D10 mod, which is really useful to be able to roll random numbers from 1 to 10.
Yeah, of course.
I don't know. Not every ASL player has a D10 lying around, and that's a little bit tricky for. I know there are ways to do it with 2D6, and I shared one with Andrea. But in terms of, I think you could definitely see yourself playing this on Vassal or on a board. The other project he's done, I think Andrea's done, is a play by self. And this is where you can take ASL scenarios and actually play them. I can see you're smiling, but you take ASL scenarios and you play them with an AI playing it. So we might take a look at that as well.
Yeah, I think we should. Yeah, I always find playing both sides quite tiring. It's quite hard work. You have to kind of keep change. You have to constantly keep adjusting who you're thinking of. You're thinking about your moves perhaps as the German player, but then you have to think about as the Russian player whether you're going to fire it or not. Yeah, I find it quite kind of hard work. It'd be quite interesting to see a system like that.
Yeah, definitely.
So an AI essentially plays the opponent. Yeah. And
I think often, you talked about this before, but you can be quite fair and you can decide, okay, well, like for example, I would fire on this, but I'm not 100% certain. So on a 5 or less, I'm going to fire, and if on a 6, I'm not going to fire. Sure. And you could do things like that. I think as a way of playing through. And I know, talking about indie again, indie plays many scenarios, just whiz through them by himself just to get a feel
Yeah.
for them, plays the first few turns. I think either Toby or David Schofield suggested doing something very similar where you just set the
Yeah.
boards up and you kind of whiz through them and just see how a scenario looks. And that ability jumps you up from if you've got no knowledge of a scenario, and 100 is, top knowledge, it jumps you up to like 30-40% very quickly playing the first few turns.
It's really interesting. So there's a lot of times I set up to play a game and I start to play you or somebody else, and I struggled when I was setting up to really understand what the key kind of like issues of the scenario were going to be. But within no time of playing it, I suddenly go, do you know what? He's going to be able to fly around that flank now. I really should have protected that. So I think you could even play it out yourself without even rolling the dice, couldn't you? Because I send a half squad off and go, well, let's assume it breaks, and flip that over and he's fired. And you could even just go through like that, couldn't you? You could play that very, very quickly.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't doubt that the good players do that as well. I think as a kind of way of or have done it so many times that they kind of can see it and read it. From that kind of thing. All right, talking to Toby, let's listen to Toby's tips about tanks.
I was recently asked at the Double One tournament near London about whether I'd be able to give some advice about attacking with armoured fighting vehicles, basically. And it seems to me it's a very complex issue, is attacking with AFVs. Lots of rules, and it's an area that really differentiates the top players who can derive every little bit of advantage with them to the sort of more average players who, they tell me that often their AFVs just end up as burning wrecks. When they're attacking, they're not sure what to do with them, so they move them forward, take risks, and next thing they know, they've lost all their AFVs. And it's to that sort of level of play. If you often find that your AFVs always get blown up when you're attacking, this advice is for you. And I've tried to sort of condense my thoughts down. I gave it a lot of thought, and I thought, what one piece of advice would I give? So this is it. Basically, don't be afraid to use your attacking AFVs as an equivalent to a fleet in being. Now, in World War II, a fleet in being was a naval asset that pretty much stayed in port. It stayed in a state of readiness, ready to sally out, but it stayed in port. But the potential it had of the damage it could do if it did sally out meant that the opponent, the enemy, had to allocate a lot of resources and put a lot of time and energy into worrying about what would happen if that naval asset did sally out of port. The main example of that is the Tirpitz in World War II, which I don't believe ever fired a shot in anger. But as it was up in the Norwegian fjords, the British had to use a colossal amount of naval assets to counter it, even though it just sat in a fjord in Norway. And you could say that the Italian fleet in World War II in the Mediterranean largely stayed in port as well, but did tie up a lot of Allied ships and naval assets. So the idea is that by staying there, it's not doing nothing. It's not doing nothing, and it's far better than if it had been destroyed. If the Tirpitz had been sunk, the British could have moved lots of their assets away and not worried as much. So I guess what it means is, by being in reserve, as it were, you influence your opponent's deployments. And you can do the same thing in ASL if you think of your AFVs as a sort of fleet, a land fleet, as it were. And the idea is that if you are in doubt, if you're thinking, oh God, my AFVs always get blown up, all I can think of to do is to move them forward into loss of his assets, and then I'll probably end up at burning wrecks. If that's what you're worried about, if you can't think of anything better to do than just moving them up and stopping them, then My advice is keep them as a fleeting being. Keep them back, out of line of sight, but with the potential to leap forward and do some damage. And what you will find is that does influence your opponent's actions. It influences his game. It increases the stress upon him far more than if you'd moved forward and he'd blown them all up. So it will affect his defensive fire shots. He might well not shoot things if he thinks that there's a potential for your AFEs to swoop in afterwards. He might leave his guns. He might not fire with certain guns at all. Leave them hip, just in case you do move forward. If your tanks were blown up, though, he'd be shooting merrily at your infantry with them. And he'll definitely be much more wary of counter-attacking with his AFEs against your infantry, because you won't want to move them out of position. Now, of course, there's no point, unless there's a CVP cap, there's no point hanging on to your tanks or AFEs right till the end of the game. You don't gain anything from that. So they, in the last turn, they might as well go nuts, so to speak, if not before. But what I'm saying is, by keeping them as a fleeting being, you are not doing nothing. If in doubt, keep them in reserve with the potential to leap forward. And just doing that, just keeping them alive and not allocating them straight away to the attack, does influence the game positively in your favour.
So good tips again, Toby. I certainly can adhere to leaving tanks alone. Martin, when you don't know what to do with tanks, have you ever done?
I think not much with them is what I end up doing, or just send them off and get them lost or something like that. So.
You're pretty good at tanks. I did read a couple of times. I think Jim's article was one of them, and I think I've read also recently. But the idea of like a tank in motion in line of sight, ending its turn, is a dead tank. If it's in line of sight of another tank in motion, it's a dead tank. So don't do that. I think that's the tip as well that I've picked up from reading, Jim and other people's writings about that kind of stuff. So that's something I try to learn. Yeah, that +2 for movement is not going to save you generally, but
no.
All right, okay. So let's talk the challenge, the ASL. What is the best official product? Now we've talked that Hackapale beat the Winter Offensive packs.
Yeah.
Next up is Armies of Oblivion. We'll assume it's the second edition against Forgotten War. So, any thoughts, Martin, on this?
Yeah, so I think this is. I'm probably going to be a little bit unfair here, but I'm going to say that I would vote for Armies of Oblivion. But I think the reason I feel like I'm probably being unfair is I probably know Armies of Oblivion better than Forgotten War. I played a couple of scenarios when it first came out, quite enjoyed it, but that's all my experience of it.
Right.
I mean, obviously, some people have mixed feelings about whether the Korean War should even be included in the system, don't they? I mean, I've got to say, I don't particularly subscribe to that. It's a game. I'm happy to see the other things being included. But you got the Romanians, haven't you, and the Hungarians and stuff like that in Armies of Oblivion.
Yeah.
And a phenomenally big number of scenarios.
Yeah.
Many of which had already been published, to be fair, in other ways. But I think I'd be very comfortably on the side of Armies of Oblivion.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think so. 32 scenarios in Armies of Oblivion, and they were the original scenarios. The original, I think it was 11. I think one was going to get produced somewhere else, but at least there were 11 in Armies of Oblivion. They were very, very big scenarios. If you look at the size of them, they were, scenario archive terms, and so take this with a pinch of salt. But 13 hours, 15 hours, 24 hours, 12 hours. With tigers on their tail, a massive scenario. 24 hours in terms of playtime, estimation. Now it will be quicker than that, but I mean these are kind of representative where the smallest scenario really was in the original version. It was sort of 6-7 hours. They were all very, very big scenarios, and that was the downside of that scenario. I think we looked at that pack when it first came out and were like shocked at how big the scenarios were, because they just weren't playable in terms of the you've got to really put across a whole day. With the new set, where they have pulled, and interestingly, they pulled some action-packed scenarios and some journal scenarios, and I think Partisan as well.
Yeah, a lot of all the Partisan scenarios are there, I think.
In there, that gives you a range of scenarios all the way down from two and a bit hours all the way up to 24 hours, which is incredible, really. So,
there's some very unusual ones. The Globus raid is quite an unusual one, isn't it? Because it's one that's surrounded by wire, I think.
Subterranean Quarry, is another one.
And Subterranean Quarry, very unusual, where the roads are actually sewer systems, aren't they?
Yep.
You can only move some quite interesting one. And I'm not sure about the thinking behind including the Partisan scenarios in Armies of Oblivion, because most of them, the Partisans are allied, aren't they?
Yeah, I think it's just a way of just getting them as a reprint rather than printing. Partisan.
Yeah. Not perhaps the updated versions and things.
Yeah. That's the shame. I think that's the one criticism I do have with MMP is I'm never sure with the new scenarios of what they've changed. Like I believe they should issue errata with every scenario update, and it would be great to see like a page where someone has kind of figured out what's changed. Because if you or I say we talked about playing Prelude to Die In recently, well, I wouldn't know even, and I can see this happening. Like for example, a Vassal tournament or something like that. If it weren't clear what scenario you were playing, and I just grab my Journal 7 or whatever it is that Prelude to Die is from, and you grab your Armies of Oblivion 2nd edition, we're going to be playing the same scenario, and would we even think to check with each other?
Yeah. But the archive does provide that information, doesn't it?
So depending on the way that the archive has worked for this one is that there is a separate scenario for the Armies of Oblivion version, as well as the one that's printed in the Journal 7. Having said that, it's not obvious that you would be looking at the right one. I mean, I certainly, when I look through scenarios to see if I played them, I look sometimes at scenario, and if there's two editions of it on the archive, I won't necessarily spot that I've played it on the other version, if you like. Now, there's a bit of a debate. I don't know the answer to this, because if a scenario changes in any significant way, add a squad, subtract a turn, whatever, can you say that you've played that scenario? And I think I'm on the side at the moment that says probably it's a different scenario. So, but I mean, I can see how that's not true if, for example, the balance of a scenario is one turn less, and you've played it with the balance, you have played that scenario. So you can make arguments for both. I don't know what the right thing to do is. I kind of wish I could come up with an answer for it, but I don't. But it would be great to know, and maybe we can even find it and we can put the information on the archive. But do we have to errata? And then do I errata both scenarios? Which one is the newest one? Because it's not obvious to a new player. Is it Armies of Oblivion or is it Journal 7? Which one? Which one came out? Now, by the way, the last thing I changed on the archive was I added the publication date to the publications, because I couldn't remember when stuff was being published. So Armies of Oblivion 2018 was 2nd edition for that. And do you know when the original Armies of Oblivion came out?
No.
This will shock you. This will properly shock you. Have a guess.
1995.
1990.
Oh, really?
Yeah, 32 years. Yeah. It's crazy, isn't it?
That's before I was a teacher.
Is that really?
Yeah.
It's crazy, isn't it? I mean,
I was still happy in 1990. Yeah.
You're happy.
That's amazing. I'm happy now. Yeah.
But it's crazy. So I mean, look, it's bonkers, isn't it?
That's crazy.
Now, I mean, I'm going to say that. The more I think about it, the more that's not right. So let me just check that. Hang on a second. So it should be said that not all the data is 100% correct on the archive. So, for example, Armies of Oblivion is not created in 1990. It was 2006. So,
and it's beautifully precise. It's January 1990. It's complete nonsense. Yeah.
That might be the default for it. So don't believe everything you read on the archive, but it's close enough. Okay, anyway, back to so Armies of Oblivion. I think we are agreeing is ahead of Forgotten
Yes.
War.
Yeah.
No disrespect.
Although, as I think it's fair to say, neither of us are experienced enough of playing Forgotten War to really give a strong opinion about it, perhaps. But yeah,
That's
Armies
right.
of Oblivion definitely gets my vote.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I will say one thing against Forgotten War is 5 night scenarios, and I know that night isn't as bad as everyone says, and we've played night, and every time we play it, we say, "Oh, we should play it more often." It's actually not so bad. 5 night scenarios is quite a lot for a Korean War module, and I don't doubt that's part of the, the kind of the
focus
draws.
of it.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it just fell out of whatever it was, 16 scenarios. I think it's a fair bit. So okay, next up is a tough one. This is a tough one, Martin.
Yeah.
Yanks or Beyond Valor 3rd edition.
So I know straight away which one I'm going to vote for.
Okay, so I'm going to assume you're going to go with Beyond Valor.
Yeah.
Okay, me too. But I mean, Yanks. I'm also, talk about Yanks.
Absolutely, yeah. I think definitely give some love to Yanks as well.
So
Yeah.
let's just talk about Yanks again, 2nd edition. If this is the last time, tremendous number of scenarios in there. 41 scenarios in Yanks 2nd edition.
3rd edition.
Second
edition, the most up to date. Yeah.
Yeah, 2nd edition is Yanks. I think there's a 3rd edition maybe being talked about. Maybe, not sure.
Okay.
And very, very, very good scenarios. So some of the new ones they've added, Ace in the Hole, which I remember playing. Rocket's Red Glare was good. Scouts Out's the one with the great replay in one of the annuals, I think.
Yeah.
There's Gavin Tate, T-Patches. T-Patches, I think, has been reprinted more times. That scenario was like an old Aslug scenario, was it? I mean,
I don't think it was Aslug. It was. It'll come to me in a minute. But was it Southern Cross or something? Or
Union of Gamers.
Cross of Iron. Oh,
Union of Gamers
right.
is one of them. I don't know if that's
It certainly had a number of iterations, and then
Aslug,
before it was taken by MMP.
Yeah,
and
Aslug
then it's
19.
been printed by MMP several different times.
Right.
Sorry.
No. But anyway, but it's been reprinted a whole bunch of times.
Yeah.
I think we've played it, but again, trying to find
Definitely
the version
played
we've
it.
played. Because that's the one where they're in the mud, isn't it? I think. Is that the one where they're in the mud, or the mud is where there's no wall, where they're off the road? They might be in mud. I can't remember.
No.
No mud in there.
I don't think so.
What's the one I'm
I don't remember. I don't remember there being mud. I remember playing Among the Ruins. I remember enjoying that. There's the Mad Minute, which is cool. And I remember Gavin's Gamble is an old favourite, isn't it? People crazy about that one.
Yeah.
And isn't there one of the first scenarios that me and you ever played in here somewhere?
Well, that is Gavin's Gamble. That's the one
Gavin's
with
Gamble,
going across, because Gavin's Take is the one I think you might be thinking
I'm
of.
getting muddled up with those two. Yes, sorry. Yeah, Gavin's Take's one everyone plays, isn't it? Gavin's Gamble one that no one plays.
That we played. We had a great
That
time
we played.
with the
We
rubber
did.
dinghies going down the tide.
The rubber dinghies, that was crazy. It's actually very pro-American according to the Raw.
Right.
Yeah. But cool
And we played
scenario.
it. And we had a good
And
time doing it.
it's the scene from the big film, The Bridge Too Far, isn't it? Of all the little dinghies going across there. Who's the actor that plays the commander? All right, come to me in a minute. Very famous guy. Anyway, he does the whole "come on, let's go." You know?
I don't remember, but I do remember that. So did I? I think you won. You won it. Coming across the river.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a very, very good game. So that was good fun. But ultimately, I guess Beyond Valor is the
Robert Redford.
Robert Redford. Okay, there you go.
Of course it is.
Okay. All right. So we're gonna go with Beyond Valor there. But
Yeah.
I think Yanks is if Yanks doesn't take Beyond Valor down, I'm going to struggle to see what will. Maybe they will.
Okay, that's fair enough. And do you know what? Going through them like this individually makes me kind of think, some really, really good scenarios here. But if you look at Beyond Valor, it's the same. There's some really, really good scenarios there, not there?
So it's very, very difficult. Very difficult. I mean, I'm going to stick with mine and say Beyond Valor, I think. But,
Yeah, me too.
But I do think that, I mean, I'll say that the average rating for the scenarios in Beyond Valor 3rd edition is 6.74.
Yeah.
Okay. The average rating for Yanks, let's find out which one is the correct one. So average rating for those scenarios is 6.76. So, you know, there or thereabouts, exactly the same.
Very close, yeah.
247 hours of playing time in Yanks.
Crazy.
It's incredible, really. But, yeah, hey, there you go. Right, so we're sticking with Beyond Valor on that one.
Yeah.
Last one for today, Code of Bushido or the ASL Journal packs?
See, I think that's nightmarish. That's a difficult one, isn't it?
Well, here's what I'm going to say. About that.
I mean, I know what I'm going to vote.
Well, I'm going to vote journals. I'm voting journals.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I was going to vote Code of Bushido.
Okay. So the reason why, because we've said before, we're not going to say that, okay, without Code of Bushido, you'd never get to play the Japanese, because
that's exactly what I was going to say. But it's not just that, though. But it's the Banzai. It's all the rules associated with it.
Yeah, but I think, okay, you're right. You're right. Okay, if we took it from that perspective, where we said, okay, if you didn't have this module, you couldn't play the Japanese.
All the Pacific.
Right. Then.
But you're thinking in terms of the scenarios.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So.
Okay. If it's about the scenarios, then it has to be the journals.
The journals, yeah. And if it's about the module itself. So, okay, what about, okay, so if we try to say this, if we said, if we were locked in, if we were going away for 3 weeks and we were only allowed to take our ASL stuff that was applicable to the one module or one pack that we took.
Yeah.
So you can either take Code of Bushido or the journals.
I take the journals.
Yeah, I take the journals.
Yeah.
I take the journals.
It's just difficult, isn't it? Because even like landing craft and seaborne assaults and stuff.
No,
no. That's in Gung Ho, isn't it? Yeah. Sorry. Okay. Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. By that logic, I mean, I'd have to agree with journals then.
Yeah. I think we have to
It's
say
some reluctance. Yeah.
Because otherwise we'd say things like, well, you'd never take anything other than Beyond Valor because you'd never play anything other than Germans and Russians. So
that's true. That's true.
You've got to be able to say it's on the scenarios itself. So I think the journal pack, and I think it goes back to the journals. I can't wait for another journal to come out. I'm looking forward to them. I think, that would be my number one magazine to read.
Yeah.
If I had a choice of, that's what I'm looking forward to. I mean,
yeah.
So, all right. So we're going to go with journals.
We've agreed on all three. I think it's the first time it's happened. No vote.
Okay. So no vote on that one. Okay. So we can get criticised instead for our votes.
That'd be great.
Yeah. Okay,
criticism.
Okay, Martin. So basically, we are off. We are doing a little bit of playtesting for Bound in Fire, which we won't be able to highlight on this one because got to keep things a little bit under wraps there. But that's for the Finnish module that is in production over there. We've said we'll help out a little bit, and we are going to crack on with our Donant campaign.
And we're on holiday a little bit, aren't we? Both
we are on holiday. I'm going to Cyprus in a couple of weeks, and you are off somewhere nice as well.
Well, Bournemouth.
That's nice.
Yeah. It's all right.
Listen, in today's weather,
I like Bournemouth. I'm going to see a mate. I'm going to hang out with some mates. Really, it's but Bournemouth is a beautiful part of the world. Yeah. Do you know what? I might see if I can go. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. Okay.
Bovington. Are you going to say Bovington or?
No, it's there, isn't it? It's there. It's not so far. I've got to try to convince people who are not interested in ASL that Bovington is the thing to do.
It's tricky. I mean, why are you going in the first place? Well, to be fair, I've got the same thing with Cyprus and my family who...
Are you going to Cyprus?
Yeah.
Fantastic. No battlefields, though, from the Second World War.
Is it not?
I don't think so. As I say, can't remember. The British were there. But I don't remember it being attacked. But I might well be wrong.
Well, hey, listen, the Sari Archive will tell me this.
Yeah.
Let me have a quick look. So, location, Cyprus. No results found.
No. I mean, I think it's strategically important because you got like basically a massive aircraft carrier that can't be sunk in the East Mediterranean. But yeah, I mean, they never went to invade it in the way they did Crete, for example, or even the air battles that you had over Malta. Right. For whatever reason, Cyprus wasn't threatened to the same extent.
Okay, all right. History with Martin.
There we go. Tune back in for another very, very like sketchy knowledge, some more sketchy knowledge.
Excellent stuff. All right, Martin, I will catch up with you soon. We'll see you all for episode 74 very soon with the Nonce Part 2.
I'm looking forward to it.
Could be the slowest campaign game ever, but we'll get through it. All right, Martin. Until then.
Take care all.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.